Hi everyone, this is Ram Martinez, your GFB chair, and I'm here to talk to you about the entity dashboards for financial indicators. So, for this one, we are going to talk about these certain tabs of the financial indicators, which are months of financial reserves, liquidity, debt ratio, conferences, and core performance. So, recap. So there are basically six main aspects under the other financial indicators sustainability of the finance standards. So first is months of financial reserves, which is the number of months of entity will be able to operate, assuming there's no more revenue to be generated. So this is the one that would say how much reserves that you would have how many months would you be able to survive with the reserves that you have. Then next is liquidity. There are two types, cash ratio and current ratio. So these are ability to meet short-term obligations, these through bank account and petty cash for the cash ratio. And then for liquidity is through short-term assets. The main difference here is cash ratio is quite crucial because this is the indicator of the company's value on the worst case scenario. Imagine if you don't have any more receivables from your LCs, then you only have to rely on cash. Then this is where the company is not expecting any more cash collections and is about to go out of business. So how much will your cash be able to cover your debt if you need to immediately pay all of those debt? Then for liquidity current ratio, similar case but on short-term assets. This is an indicator on how reliable your short-term assets are to be used immediately to cover immediate debts. Debt ratio is measures companies' leverage, where high ratio indicates bulk of assets are funded by debt. High ratio also implies greater financial risk as debt must be repaid. So basically, this is just dividing debt towards assets just to show how much debt is actually equivalent to the assets. Yeah. Then core performance is measures the percentage contribution of core revenue to total revenue. There are different calculations for LC and MC and entity, which we will talk about later. Then conferences is just assessing profitability. Most of financial reserves, so the way this is calculated is equity of the month divided by average cost of 12 previous months. So for example, if the month is September 2019, that means you get equity of September 2019 divided by average of October 2018 up to September 2019. Then there are four types of zones, which are ideal, minimum. So ideally, if MOFR is 6 months, then that is the ideal. Moderate to high risk is if it is between 6 to 3 months, meaning there is a relatively high there's a risk to high risk that's going to happen. High risk to critical survival is between 3 and 0, meaning you would say that, oh, you only have 1 month of reserves left, or 2 months reserves left. Then that would be quite crucial, as you know how AIESEC works. You need a lot of time to prepare for certain events or operations, etc. The negative reserves are in debt if MOFR is less than 0. That means you have too much debt to the point that you have a negative equity already. Liquidity, as mentioned, there are two formulas. This is quite relatively same as the one mentioned in the previous one, where cash is cash divided by short-term liabilities. Current ratio is cash plus short-term liabilities divided by short-term liabilities. Current is cash plus short-term receivables divided by short-term liabilities. So cash ratio is at least 1, so meaning ideally cash would be greater than or equal to the debt that you have, because that would mean that you could immediately pay off all of your debt. Then current ratio is at least 1.5. That means there's cash and short-term receivables, and then you can pay immediately your short-term liabilities, so that at least if those short-term liabilities are paid, then you can still have some few amounts that can still be used just to continue your operations. Yeah. Debt ratio is total liabilities divided by total assets. So at most, the results should be 0.5, because we don't want to be like 50% of your assets are equal to your debt. That means that you would, if you need to pay immediately your debt, like you don't want 50 or 60 or 70% just to be able to cover all of the debt, then, because that would mean there is quite an issue. Then core performance is LCs, MC, and entities. So LC, the core revenue of LC is only direct, so meaning only exchange. MC, core revenue, is direct plus entity affiliation fees that MC collects from LCs. Then entity is entity direct revenues divided by entity total revenues. Entity affiliation fees is of course not included here because they should counteract between LCs and MC. There are three types of core performance of levels. So either you are high, you are medium, or you are low. So if you are high, that means your results should be between 70 to 100%, because that means majority of the core revenue you have is is encompassing the total revenue. Medium is if it's between 40 to 50, 40 to 70. That means relative the exchange to the core revenue to non-core revenue is relatively the same. Meanwhile, low core performance is between 0 to 40. That means you have majority of the revenue source that you use is actually coming from non-exchange here. Then core conferences basically just don't generate a loss. That's it. Indicators. So first is months of financial reserves. So once you go to the dashboards, you will see these tables. So these tables is the calculation just to show how they are calculated. So as you know, months of financial reserves is equity divided by average 12 months equals to months of financial reserves. Then they would apply to MC and entity, then to each single month. MOFR trends is visual a comparison of months of financial reserves progress of LC's MC and entity into 4 different zones from ideal to negative status. So in each of these zones there are different colors, which are blue, yellow, red, and black. And then each LC's and MC an entity has their different lines. So the line graphs are the LCMC entity results, while the area, this one at the bottom, are the zones. So if the results goes over the blue, that means over the blue broken line, that means you are good with your financial state. If this below the blue line and also within different zones, that means your status is within can be checked on these results, which is the ideal, minimum, moderate to high risk to critical, and negative. Liquidity. So liquidity ratio is this one, where similar application to the one of months of reserves, where these tables shows the calculation of the cash ratio and current ratio. I'm not going to repeat the calculation again. And then there are different months. Liquidity trends is visualized comparison of monthly liquidity for LC's MC entity. So this is for cash ratio and current ratio. So the zones here indicates the ideal minimum. So there's no brackets, just minimums. So if it is whether high or lower than that minimum, then that could be a good indication or bad indication of where your status is. So for example, for cash ratio for this entity, this blue line is actually going above the cash ratio minimum most of the months, but there are also certain months that the cash ratio is quite low. So that means there are some months that you need to take care. And then for red, there are some months that are quite high. There are also some entities that would say that there's nothing showing in this graphs, because there are some entities that doesn't have any debt at all. All right, debt ratio, similar. Oops. Yeah. Debt ratio, similar application as to the one earlier. So meaning I'm not going to talk about the calculation anymore. But basically it's liabilities divided by assets. So similar idea to liquidity, but you would have an issue if your results is higher than 0.5 instead of a lower. So meaning ideally your results should be lower than 0.5. So this there are certain months for this entity. There are certain months that 3 months actually are quite high in the debt ratio part. So meaning those months they should be able to see on what they're supposed to be looking at. So this applies for LC, MC, and entity as well. Yeah. So next is core performance. So this is the scope of calculation. Core performance, as this is based on 12 months data, by the way, because this also is related to the sustainability levels as well. So I'm not going to go through this one anymore because this was already mentioned, the sustainability level. But yeah, now core performance is the how they are being calculated. Basically, just divided what is core revenue and non-core revenue. As already mentioned, LC's core revenue is based on exchange. MC is exchange plus entity affiliation fees. Then entity as a whole is exchange. But in terms of the total revenues, entity affiliation is not counted. Now, these are the trends. So ideally, your trends should be within these scenarios. Yeah. So if there are three zones, which is 70 high core performance is 70 to 100%, medium is 40 to 70, low is 0 to 40, and then depending on the status of the MC and LC and entity, then these results would change. Now on this one, because core performance is a profit loss type, so this is the only indicator, one of the only indicators that actually has budgeted projections. So as you can see, there are these broken lines that corresponds to what could actually be the projected core performance that you are aiming for. So the blue dotted line is the for LCs, and then the equivalent budgeted line is the green dash with triangle points. So there are these targets that based on the budget that you want to have. Similar for red, which is this orange one, and then this yellow broken line, yellow dotted line with the violet broken line. So you can see there are those projections that happens here. Then conference part 1. So similar application to us to previous tables already, which is first part is just monthly and cumulative, but this is only for conference profit and loss. So as mentioned as before in previous tables as well, one part is monthly comparison just to show how is the profit losses of different months based on conferences, and cumulative meaning how the progress is since the term started on when if you're going to total the conferences and up until the end of the term. These graphs apply for LCs, MC, and entity as well. Conference part 2 is this one shows the breakdown for LC, MC, and entity based on type of data of 1819 executed, 1920 executed, 1920 budgeted. So this, for example, for conference revenue and cost, if you add these two equal to monthly conference profit loss, then cumulative is the progress in every month. So there are times that cumulative would be increasing or decreasing depending on the previous monthly conference profit losses. Then apply same application to other parts as well. Then there are graphs, which is conference financial performance analysis, which is a comparison of conference revenue, conference cost, alongside monthly profits and cumulative. So you can say what could be the relationship between revenue and cost, and what is the profit loss progress over the course of the term. Now this is there are three graphs for LCs, MC, and entity, and repeated three times for 1920, 1920 budgeted, and 1819 budgeted. Sorry, 1819 executed. Sorry. So all these content would be applied to LCs, MC, and entity as well. So now the next slide would be all about indirect costs. Now the indirect cost is mainly related to sustainability levels. So if you're interested to learn more about this, you can go here, and see you guys. Bye bye.